Tapping in.
Are we live?
BLM is facing a little bit of scrutiny, particularly one of the three co-founders, as my brothers mentioned, Miss Patrice Khan Colors, who along with Alicia Garcia and Opal Tometi founded the Black Lives Matter movement, or at least kind of coined the term and started to organize the broader national effort. And Miss Colors has recently come under investigation, under the spotlight for some of her real estate purchases and maneuvers. And it's looking, there's insinuations flying around that maybe that money might have been related to donations to Black Lives Matter. You hate to see it. And I don't, this is a sticky one, bro.
It's a sticky one because we are participants of the Black Lives Matter movement, active participants. My brother Miles, you shared over that time the work that you were doing in Chicago in helping organize some of the larger marches that were happening in during the Black Lives Matter movement in Chicago, you know, that whole social uptick. And what's interesting about that is that it was one of the first and few instances we've seen a large pouring in of funding for a single organization, right? It's not the largest, but it's like over the COVID period, we saw large spikes in where money was moving towards. And in this particular instance, the Black Lives Matter organization was a recipient of that, raising almost 95 million US dollars up until 2020, as recent as 2020.
That's a lot of cash. That's a lot of cash. I think what's important. We'll start a little bit with the structure of Black Lives Matter, and then kind of get into the specifics of the allegations that have brought us to the conversation. But Black Lives Matter has always had, in spite of being able to point to these three women as part of the organizational structure, it's always had a diversified leadership model, which means that in different cities and even within cities, different groups under the banner of the movement for Black Lives, and sometimes connected with larger, more national structures of Black Lives Matter, and sometimes not, have been operating and organizing with abolition of police as kind of a loose framework that unites and is kind of a through line through all of their work. But their approaches, the ways in which how many people are a part of each of these different groups or subgroups varies a lot. So I think it's important to say that intentionally, I think Black Lives Matter is a movement that has used a diversified leadership model to ensure that no individual person's actions or ideas are greater or more important than the movement at large, right? Now, in spite of that, these three women have, who are credited with kind of being the first to proliferate the term and kind of start building the momentum of the movement, are seen as the heads, and for better or worse, what they do certainly does affect the rest of the movement. But it's also important to note that all three of those women have resigned in their roles as founders and directors. I mean, you can't resign, you're always the founder, but they've resigned from official leadership positions in Black Lives Matter, the Global Network Foundation. And so I think that colors this story in an interesting way too.
The reason we're being very specific about our language on this matter is because it is very sensitive. Black Lives Matter movement represents, for most of us, what would be the arc of the social change that happened over COVID, when there was the largest march that happened ever, with 1 million people marching at the same time. This trumps the Million Man March, ironically, because it was happening all around the world, right? It was just millions and millions of people. A true moment in what many will remember as a revolutionary moment for us, right? If you think about it, like I just mentioned, the Million Man March with Dr. King, when they led that was a monumental moment, and so was this, and it was led by the Black Lives Matter movement. Started as a hashtag on Twitter, as this hashtag Black Lives Matter. So it's important to approach this with care, because when allegations such as misuse of money, like we've been hearing in this particular instance, that the co-founders, and as recent as in 2020, had bought homes to the tune of 6.4 million US dollars. So this is a large, this is quite a bit of spending, right? Now, what I don't agree with is is purchases being scrutinized unless there can actually be proven to be um, from an instance of fraud, right? So if somebody makes a large purchase, I don't say no, that person is stealing directly. There's a lot that you can do with it. So what I've decided to do, Brother Miles, is go and do what would simply just be called an investigation line on when the money was done, right? So if you just take linearly, just look at the points in time where things happen. When was the first house bought? When was Black Lives Matter started? When did the movements? When did opportunities of additional income become realized by the leaders in that movement that would justify that type of spending? You know, real high level finance stuff that we bring to you. You know what I'm saying?
Oh man, they got private eyes way on this one. You know what I'm saying? They got Chestnut Incorporated on the case. This is deep. Like, all right, brother.
Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, hit us with the timeline.
Sherlock Holmes. Hence the bandanas.
What had happened?
So essentially, 2013 is when Black Lives Matter, when the George Zimmerman um, first Black Lives Matter push happened, right in 2013. This happened at a time where we were still in university. I went to that march, I believe. I don't recall if you were at that march, but it was happening in pockets in universities throughout the U.S. and actually the African and Black Latinos Association at the U of I did a great job at handling, at like being able to spread that. Some of our good friends were leading that, which was pretty cool. So that's in 2013. For context, 2015, Black Lives Matter is officially founded through a hashtag. 2016, after 2015, you have in 2016 the first purchase of land by a Black Lives Matter co-founder to the tune of 510,000 USD. That's the first home. The first time injection of capital could justify an expense of that much is in 2018 when Khan publishes a best-selling book. So she might have signed a deal over there, a publishing deal that could give her the cash to be able to do it. And then, in my opinion, and then in 2020 she signs a multi-platform deal with Warner Brothers. So between 2018 and 2020, there seems to have been a period where an income of cash can be justified for the expenditure that happens thereafter in 2021, where she's going on a house shopping spree, as they call it, buying up 3 additional homes over that time. So where it stands out is between 2016 and 2018. That's a wee bit fishy for my books.
I see where you're coming from, and I appreciate you outlining the timeline in that way. I don't know what outside of Black Lives Matter, Miss Colors might have been, you know, like, I don't know what type of other jobs or sources of income that she might have had outside of that. I know a little bit more about where those different sources of income stand today. But that's an interesting take on it. You know what I mean? To like, yeah, I don't know. When you say that there's no justification for the spending 2016 to 2018, you're mostly talking about the actual you're actually talking about the spending, or like you're only talking about influxes from Black Lives Matter, right?
So when reporting on the spending,
can you hear that? I wasn't sure if y'all can hear it. This is recorded live in the hood, ladies and gentlemen, so I wasn't sure if I tried to play through it. Yeah.
Those are definitely sounds of the hood for sure.
That's for sure. This is South Shore ASMR for y'all. Big facts. My bad.
So when I say there's no justification for spending, over that same period of time, that's when Colors, who is the co-founder who made the purchases, that's when she said her majority of her work was coming from Black Lives Matter, so she was able to give herself a salary justifying 120,000 USD a year. So that is the premise that we're taking it on, right? What she said she was worth based on what her income earning potential was at that time. So, like I said, there is a period where that increases, and she's clearly made this, moves outside of Black Lives Matter to be able to justify the type of spending that she does, to the best of my knowledge. But there is a period of time where there is expenditure that is irregular and compounded by the fact that the last tax report that was given was in 2019, and they still have yet to file for their 2020 or 2021. That is also indicative of either ignorance or of the dubious behavior.
So one thing, I don't want to conflate Miss Color's finances with the overall finances of BLM. And I think that while obviously as the founder and executive director, their allegations certainly put her in this position where that's part of the question. But I would say that just in terms of BLM not filing those documents for, and it's again, we're speaking about specifically the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, which is an acronym that is a waste of time because it's so long. But you know what I'm saying? So that's why we keep using BLM, but we're actually talking about the specific arm and outreach of it that was owned by another company beforehand. And so when I looked into why they've been able to get away with not releasing that document for so long, a lot of it has to do with them moving around from being owned by another company. Whether you want to, if you want to take that as shady, I ain't even mad at you, bro. I think the larger issue that I kind of saw with like this issue that with this whole story is that, okay, so she buys these homes, right? So like, let's say the homes are all good. Let's say it's legitimate. Let's say she raised, you save money, bro. Like I don't make $120,000 a year, and I'm about to make a real estate purchase of a comparable size to her first purchase, right? And so there are ways to manage to make that actually happen. So she's bought a series of homes, right? If real estate's her side hustle, that's cool. The thing that brought the whole story to attention and to a head this week is actually specifically related to a $6 million mansion that they purchased last year in 2021 in October. And the thing that is more of a sticking point to me than even like the prior homes is that they purchased this for $6 million from a real estate agent named Dane Pascal, who used to work for the real estate firm that Colors runs, and he bought it for $3.1 million.
Hold on. You're introducing new information into this right here.
You ain't know this?
I did not know this. What you say? Are you telling me in layman terms that it was a flip?
Yeah, they flipped it. And this is what I'm saying, because like we don't have access to her complete financial records. We don't have access to the obviously, because they haven't been released, the Black Lives Matter. I'm gonna go give y'all the whole thing again. Global Network Foundations, right? Because we're not just speaking about BLM in general, but we haven't gotten that particular branch's financial records back. But this was the bigger issue to me, right? Because that can all be cleared up, I think. But homie bought this in October of 2020. He bought this October 2020, first of 2020. He sold it October 27th for almost double the price. And there's no explanation for why they doubled the price, right? And that I'm like, all right, that's a little bit off, right? So go boom, they explaining the situation. They interview Miss Colors. She says that the home was purchased as a safe place, as a safe space for creators to work on BLM and abolition related content in the home, right? But internal documents from BLM circulate and have some very specific language about killing the story, about massaging the angles from which they're being attacked. And that was the issue. And that's the more difficult to explain aspect of this. And so from the perspective of the research I did, I just wanted, that's the point that I'm more like, it ain't looking great.
So what do we do in light of this type of information, because the movement is still as important? They have done a lot in the time that they've raised $95 million, 25 million of that, 23.4 million of that has been distributed to local BLM network organizations or other local activist organizations. And so even in that sense, that would be 3 times higher than what the usual amount of um, CSR cash be. So they're clearly doing things at a higher standard than most people are doing, which needs to be taken into consideration, because just breaking the whole thing down doesn't make sense. We, as we have mentioned on the show, we run an organization, an NGO. We have released our impact reports. We release our we explain all the work that we've been doing over time. Granted, we're nowhere near where Black Lives Matter was in the scope of the type of income that they have, but I do believe in being prepared for those types of things, which is why we've, almost to a detriment towards our growth, have focused so intently on the administrative process of things. It's hurt us at some points. It's some opportunities have slipped by us because of our approach to wanting to make sure everything is done by the book, so that when it does happen and a large income of cash comes in, our system will be at a place to accommodate it, because we've checked all of our boxes.
Big facts. Unimpeachable, I believe, is the term that you're looking for. That's what you want your stuff to be: unimpeachable, right? Be willing to stand up to any type of scrutiny. And under this scrutiny, let's be clear, right, that folks from BLM GNF and as well as Ms. Colors have come out to deny that there's any connection between her financial purchases and donations that went to BLM. They specifically said that they cannot and did not commit any organizational resources toward the purchase of Ms. Colors' personal property. And so they've also responded and demanded that, I believe, the New York Post remove the insinuation that funds from Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation were used indirectly or directly to purchase real estate. So they maintain that everything is above board. And I think I love the way where you took it to what our approach and what other folks that are in the impact space can take from this and learn from this. And I think it's that transparency has got to be a priority. That's number one, right? And two, that maybe we do need to think differently about what leadership looks like in the space of impact, specifically with grassroots organizations, specifically with community-led organizations. There's something very valuable about having a figurehead, about having somebody that you can point to that is the representation of what you believe in, and who gives people hope for their own ability to grow and to be able to impact, and what one person can do. But I also think that we've come to this space where we've seen models. We've even highlighted some here, right? Good Kids Mad City, which we highlighted 2 weeks ago, is an organization with a truly diversified leadership model to where there is no 1-3 group of people that runs it, right? It's truly a shared responsibility, and in a lot of ways, Black Lives Matter is that, with the exception of these three ladies, and I think benefits from that. And so, how can we, not only as organizers and activists, think about systems and structures that allow us to collaborate without having one single person or even a handful of people as a linchpin whose own faults and challenges reverberate throughout the entire organization. And even as individuals, how can we start to think about the ways in which we put people up on pedestals, about what it means to have the amount of scrutiny under the surveillance that we have now, like when somebody is the founder of a movement, the face of a movement. That's so much scrutiny. So does any of us even want that, as leaders and organizers? We have a lot to think about.
You know where it gets messed up, Miles, is that people, it's like companies do well with having a figurehead. What, like, for directional purposes, you know, for marketing related reasons, it is important to be able to know, okay, who's handling which part of the ship at all times. It makes decision making a lot more streamlined. It's quite effective in that way. You know, it's really when there is a fine line between decentralized leadership like we have in the comments, or um, you know, a single figurehead leader.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy to think about. Like, I'm looking at these pictures, man, and it's crazy to think about the temptation that represents. It's crazy to think about what it's like to go to nothing, to be dealing with millions of dollars, multiple commas. I appreciate what you laid out in terms of our approach of doubling down on the administrative side, on the accounting side, before we even have anything to account, so that by the time it hits our account, it's going to be counted correct. You know what I'm saying? Like, but it's I've been thinking so much about that Dave Chappelle quote, where it's from an interview. I think it's almost about 10 years old now, where he says, weak people don't get to be in the spotlight, be at the forefront of media. Weak people don't get to sit in that space. And when you see them start to break, or when you see them start to act in a way that you don't understand, it's important to remember that maybe the environment's a little sick. And so prepare yourself for that. They will give you the tools that you need to destroy yourself. And you have to fortify your spirit and your plans and your intentions and your community against that.